Welcome to today's deep dive. I am your host, and I have to say, this is one of the most eye-opening topics we've covered in a while.
And I am your resident expert. Really glad to be here. I've been, buried in the data for this one. And it's heavy, but it is so necessary to talk about.
It really is. So to kick things off, I want to start today with a thought experiment. It's a little intense, so just stay with me here.
Okay, I'm ready.
Imagine a visionary billionaire contacts you out of the blue, and they tell you they have selected your 10-year-old child to join the very first permanent human settlement on Mars.
Mars. Okay, wow. That is quite the offer. Bit of a commute.
Right. But here's the catch. You learn that the gravity on Mars is only 38% of Earth's gravity.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So if your child grows up there, their bones, their heart, their muscles, they're all going to develop completely differently. They might even be, fundamentally deformed compared to a human raised on Earth.
Because they just don't have the resistance they need to grow properly.
Exactly. And on top of that, because of the radiation up there, their risk of cancer is just absolutely through the roof.
And I assume if they go, they can't come back. I mean, their bodies literally wouldn't be able to handle Earth's gravity anymore after developing in low G.
That's exactly right. It is a one-way trip.
Yeah.
So you're the parent. The question is, would you sign the permission slip? Would you let your 10-year-old go?
I mean, of course not. No, that sounds like a horror movie. No parent in their right mind would agree to that.
Because it's too dangerous.
It's physically dangerous, yes. And permanently altering. You would be knowingly sending your kid into an environment that literally breaks them.
Well, here is where it gets really interesting. And honestly, a little terrifying for anyone listening. According to the source material we are covering today, we have effectively already done this.
We have.
We didn't send them to Mars, physically, obviously. But we sent an entire generation, Gen Z, so anyone born after 1995, into a totally new alien environment that is actively hostile to human development. We sent them to the virtual world.
Yeah. And this is the central metaphor in the book we're exploring today, The Anxious Generation by social psychologist Jonathan Haidt.
It's a heavy read.
Very heavy, but incredibly important. Haidt argues that we have witnessed what he calls a great rewiring of childhood. And the data suggests this virtual environment is doing to their minds exactly what Mars would do to their bodies.
And just to set the stakes here for you listening at home, we aren't just talking about kids being, a little moody or a bit distracted at the dinner table.
No, not at all.
We're talking about a massive statistical collapse in mental health across an entire generation.
Precisely. And I think the most fascinating, or maybe just the most frustrating part of Haidt's argument is the paradox right at the center of it. Think back to the 1990s and the early 2000s. As parents, or just as a society, what were we totally obsessed with?
Oh, we were constantly worrying. It was stranger danger, right? We completely stopped letting kids play outside unsupervised. We were terrified of kidnappers in white vans, even though statistically, crime rates were actually dropping significantly during that entire period.
That is the irony of it all. We became obsessed with safetyism in the real world. We drastically overprotected children from the physical world.
Like stopping them from walking to school.
Right, or playing in the park alone, which is actually where they need to be to learn resilience and independence. But at the exact same time we were overprotecting them there, we completely underprotected them in the virtual world.
So we locked the front door to keep them safe, but we basically handed them a portal to a world with absolutely no safety rails.
No supervision at all.
None. Just handing them over to algorithms designed by the smartest engineers on the planet specifically to hook their attention.
And that really brings us to the mission of our deep dive today. We are going to unpack what exactly happened between roughly 2010 and 2015 to cause this epidemic. We'll look at why it hit girls and boys differently, because the data shows it absolutely did.
Yes, very different reactions.
And then, crucially, we're going to look at the 4 foundational reforms Haidt proposes to actually fix this.
So let's get right into the data. Because sometimes you hear people say things like, oh, every generation thinks the kids are doomed.
Right, the classic moral panic argument.
Yeah, or they say, kids are just more comfortable talking about their feelings now, so of course the numbers look worse. Is that what's happening here? Is this just a reporting error?
Haidt anticipates that exact skepticism, and he tackles it head-on. He calls this phenomenon the tidal wave. If you look at the longitudinal studies for teen mental health, so things like anxiety, depression, self-harm, they are relatively stable for years, just flat lines, mostly.
Okay.
And then right around 2012, they all start to look like a hockey stick. They just shoot straight up.
2012. That is such a specific year. Why 2012? I mean, the iPhone came out in 2007. Shouldn't a spike have started back then?
You would think so, but you have to remember what those first iPhones were like. They were expensive, they were slow, and they didn't even have an app store initially.
Oh, that's true. They were basically tools for business people to check their email on the go.
Exactly. 2012, though, was the convergence of a few really critical factors. First, that was the year smartphone market penetration crossed 50%. Suddenly, most people actually had one in their pocket.
Okay, so access became universal.
Yes, but more importantly, the very nature of social media changed fundamentally during that window.
How so? What shifted?
Well, Facebook acquired Instagram in 2012, and smartphones got high-quality front-facing cameras right around 2010.
Oh, right.
Think about that shift. Before that, you took photos of your friends or the scenery. After that, you took photos of yourself.
The dawn of the selfie
The
era.
selfie era. And crucially, just before this, in 2009, we got the like button and the retweet button. This is a distinction Haidt makes that I think is just brilliant.
Yeah, let's dig into that.
Before 2009, social media was mostly about communication. You're posting on a friend's wall or sending a message. After 2009, it became about performance.
Because it quantified your social standing. You could see exactly how popular you were compared to everyone else in real time.
Exactly. It subjected every single interaction to constant, quantified public judgment. And the data clearly shows this hit girls particularly hard.
Right, let's break down that gender divide. Why did this specific change impact girls more severely than boys?
It really comes down to how boys and girls tend to process distress. Girls suffer much more from what psychologists call internalizing disorders. So, anxiety and depression.
Turning the pain inward.
Yes. Boys tend toward externalizing disorders, acting out, aggression, rule breaking. Social media is an environment almost perfectly designed to trigger internalizing disorders.
Because it's just a massive comparison crap.
It is constant visual social comparison. It weaponizes insecurity. And the statistics Haidt presents on this are genuinely shocking. Between 2010 and 2020, emergency room visits for self-harm among young adolescent girls, and we are talking ages 10 to 14 here, nearly tripled.
Tripled. That's not a statistical error or a slight bump.
No. It increased by 188%. And for suicide rates in that exact same demographic, it went up 167%.
Wow.
This is why Haidt is so firm that this isn't just kids complaining more today. You don't admit yourself to a hospital for physical self-harm because you're just feeling more comfortable talking about your feelings.
Right.
This represents real, acute physical suffering.
That is heartbreaking. It really puts those mental health crisis headlines into perspective for you when you hear those numbers. Okay, so that's the girls. But what about the boys? You mentioned they usually have externalizing issues. Did those rates go up too?
Actually, no, and that is the tricky part that kind of hid the crisis for boys for a while. Externalizing issues like getting in physical fights, arrests, or car accidents actually went down.
Well, on the surface, that sounds like good news, right? Less fighting, fewer car crashes.
It sounds great, but Haidt argues it is not because boys suddenly got healthier or better adjusted. It's because they withdrew. They just went to their rooms.
The failure to launch.
Right. For boys, the Great Rewiring manifests mostly as a retreat from the real world into the virtual one, specifically into immersive video games and pornography. Haidt uses a really poignant case study of a boy named James in the text to illustrate this.
Yeah, I remember this from our notes. He was a kid with mild autism, doing okay in school, doing martial arts. He was engaged in the real world.
Right. He had a life. And then the pandemic hit, schools closed, and his parents, who were just trying to cope, like we all were, bought him a PlayStation, and he got totally hooked on Fortnite.
And we should clarify, Fortnite isn't just a game where you shoot things. It is a massive social platform.
It really is. It's a digital hangout space. But for James, it became his only world. When his parents finally tried to restrict his screen time, his behavior didn't just get annoying, it deteriorated into severe aggression and total withdrawal.
He just completely checked out.
He refused to leave his room. The tragic part is how trapped his parents felt. They literally said he doesn't have any friends other than those online, so how much can we really cut him off?
And that's the trap right there. If everyone else is living on Mars and you force your kid to stay on Earth, they are entirely alone.
Yes. That is the collective action problem, which we will definitely get to later when we talk about solutions. But first, we really need to understand the mechanism behind all of this. We know what a massive spike in mental illness starting around 2012. Now we need the how.
All right.
Kate talks about the historical shift from a play-based childhood to a phone-based childhood.
Oh, this is a huge sociological shift. Let's unpack that for the listener.
It really is the core shift of our time. For all of human history, up until about 2010, childhood was play-based. It was embodied.
Embodied meaning you are physically present. You might get pushed, you might scrape your knee, you have to read facial expressions and body language.
Yes. Embodied synchronous meaning, it happens in real time, face-to-face, and largely unsupervised. Think about when you were a kid. If you had a dispute during a game of tag in the neighborhood, you had to work it out. If you didn't, the game ended.
Yeah, nobody was coming to save you.
Exactly. You learned crucial social skills because the bar for entry and exit was high. You couldn't just block your friend and find a new one instantly. You were stuck with the kids on your street.
Right. You had to learn how to deal with annoying people. You had to learn negotiation and compromise.
Which is a fundamental life skill.
Yeah.
If you can't deal with friction in a relationship, you simply cannot function as an adult. But the phone-based childhood is the exact opposite. It is disembodied. It is asynchronous. You text someone, they reply 3 hours later.
Or they don't reply at all.
Right. And it has a very low bar for entry and exit. If an interaction gets slightly awkward or difficult, you just swipe away. Or you ghost them.
Haidt uses a term for this that I found really useful to explain the damage: the experience blocker.
Yes. This is a brilliant insight. We so often worry about the actual content kids are seeing on their screens. Violence, porn, cyberbullying. And to be clear, that is bad. But Haidt argues the much bigger problem is the opportunity cost. It's what they are not doing because they're staring at a phone. The phone actively blocks the real-world experiences they need to grow up.
It blocks the sleep, the sunlight, the physical movement.
And the awkwardness. It blocks the risky play. If you never climb a tree that you might fall out of, you never learn how to manage fear and calculate risk. If you never have to sit in an awkward silence with a crush because you can just send them a Snapchat, you never develop social courage. We have literally deprived a generation of the training ground for adulthood.
There's also a pretty severe biological mismatch happening here too, isn't there? We are handing these devices to kids whose brains literally are not physically ready for them.
This goes back to the growing up on Mars analogy. The human brain develops in distinct stages. The reward-seeking parts of the brain, the limbic system, the parts that chase dopamine and desperately want social validation, those mature very early, right around the start of puberty.
So the accelerator is just pressed all the way to the floor?
Exactly. But the frontal cortex, the part of the brain that controls impulses, plans for the long term, and says, hey, maybe I shouldn't post this, that part isn't fully wired or myelinated until you are in your mid-20s.
So we are giving a high-pressure dopamine fire hose to a brain that has absolutely no brakes installed yet.
We are taking the most vulnerable, socially insecure period of a human life, which is middle school, and inserting a device designed by the world's smartest engineers to relentlessly exploit that vulnerability for engagement. It's almost entirely unfair to the kids.
When you put it that way, it sounds wildly negligent on our part as a society.
Haidt actually compares it to leaded gasoline.
Oh, that's a great analogy. Break that down for us.
Well, in the mid-20th century, we had mounting, undeniable evidence that the lead we put in gasoline was actively damaging children's brain development. It was causing cognitive issues, lower IQs, and driving up antisocial behavior.
But nothing happened for a long time.
Right, because the oil and auto companies fought regulation for decades. They prioritized their profits over public health. Haidt argues we are in that exact same phase right now with social media. We know it is toxic, especially for the developing adolescent brain, but the tech companies are prioritizing user engagement and ad revenue.
Okay, so we have identified the problem. We sent the kids to Mars. The air up there is toxic and their bones are deforming. How do we bring them back to Earth? Because Haidt doesn't just leave us hanging. He proposes 4 foundational reforms.
He does, and before we even list them, we really have to acknowledge why fixing this feels so impossible for individual parents. It is a classic collective action problem.
Right. It's the I can't be the only mean parent in the neighborhood problem.
Exactly. If your child is the only one in their class without a smartphone, they are genuinely socially isolated. They miss out on the group chats where the plans are made. That is a very real, valid fear for parents. But if all the parents in a class or school agree to hold off together, then no one is isolated. The solution fundamentally requires community coordination. You can't solve this alone in your own house.
So it really does take a village.
Right.
Quite literally.
Okay.
Let's run through these 4 reforms. For anyone taking notes, here is reform number 1.
No smartphones before high school.
So roughly age 14.
Right. And to be very clear, this doesn't mean no phones at all. It means no smartphones. You can give your kid a flip phone, a dumb phone.
Right, something with buttons.
Yes, they can call you, they can text you to tell you practice is over. They just cannot have 204/7 internet access and an app store in their pocket.
I really love that distinction. I think we constantly conflate safety with having a supercomputer. You can be perfectly safe with a basic Nokia brick phone.
Absolutely. It keeps the tether to the parents without providing the portal to the virtual world. Which brings us to reform number 2, no social media before age 16.
This one feels huge. Why 16 specifically?
It is critical timing. This is entirely about protecting that early puberty window we talked about earlier. By 16, the brain has developed at least a little more impulse control and a slightly stronger, more stable sense of self. You are much less likely to be completely shattered by a cruel comment section at 16 than you are at 11 or 12.
That makes total sense. Give them a chance to build a foundation first.
Exactly.
Okay, reform number 3 is for the schools.
Yes. Phone-free schools. And he doesn't just mean a policy of keep it in your backpack. He means physically stored away in lockers. Or using those magnetic locking pouches like Yandra pouches that you see at comedy shows.
Because if it's in the pocket, it's still buzzing.
Mm-hmm.
Or they're sneaking a look under the desk.
Even if it's turned off and not buzzing. Just the potential for it to buzz fragments their attention. There's fascinating research showing that merely having a smartphone in the same room visibly reduces a person's cognitive capacity.
Just knowing it's there drains your brain.
Right. Haidt argues that the only way to free up attention for deep learning, and, crucially, for actual socialization between classes, is to physically remove the phones for the entirety of the school day.
It forces kids to actually look at each other in the hallway.
Exactly. It forces embodied synchronous interaction. It basically brings a piece of the play-based childhood back into their daily routine.
And finally, we have reform number 4. And I think this one might actually be the hardest one for modern parents to swallow because it goes against all of our current instincts.
More independence. We had to actively reverse the overprotection in the real world. We need to let kids walk to school with their friends, play in the park unsupervised, and figure out how to manage their own minor conflicts.
We basically have to trust that the real world is actually safer than the virtual one.
Because statistically, it is. The kidnapping rates and violent crime against children by strangers are incredibly low. But the depression and anxiety rates in the virtual world are unbelievably high. We need to stop guarding them from the physical world and start guarding them from the digital one.
It really is a total flip of the current parenting script. It feels almost radical to say, just let them go outside alone.
It is radical today, but Haidt deeply believes that if we do these 4 things, and if we do them together as communities, we can actually see substantial improvements in adolescent mental health within just 2 years. We can literally rewire them back to Earth settings.
It's hopeful, in a way. It says the damage isn't entirely permanent if we just change the environment they are growing up in.
Exactly. Young brains are highly plastic. They can recover and adapt if we give them the chance.
You know, as we wrap this up, I'm really struck by how ancient this human vulnerability actually is, even though the technology exploiting it is brand new. I know Haidt quotes the Stoic philosopher Epictetus from the 1st century in the book.
Yes, I love this quote. It anchors the whole philosophical argument of the book. Epictetus basically asked why we get so fiercely angry if someone touches our physical body without our permission, yet we so readily hand over our minds to anyone who wants to criticize or confuse us.
The quote is something like, "Why aren't you ashamed that you have made your mind vulnerable to anyone who happens to criticize you?" That hits incredibly hard when you think about scrolling through Twitter or checking your Instagram comments.
It really does. We are willingly handing over our peace of mind to opaque algorithms and anonymous strangers. And this isn't just about saving the kids, really. It is about reclaiming human life for all of us across every generation. We all need to spend a little less time in the disembodied, asynchronous virtual world and much more time in the embodied, messy, real world.
So here's the thought I want to leave you with today as you go about your life. Go back to that Mars analogy we started with. If a billionaire asked to take your child to a low-gravity planet that would permanently deform their bones and risk their life, you would scream no immediately. You protect their physical body at absolutely all costs.
So why are we so passive when it comes to an environment that is so clearly deforming their minds?
That is the question. What is one step? Maybe it's just one of those 4 reforms for your kids, or maybe it's just leaving your own phone in the car when you go to the grocery store that you can take today to bring a child, or maybe even yourself, back down to earth.
Because the gravity is much better here.
It really is. Thanks for diving in with us.